Love activity is the pulse beat of the soul's heart, Jesus teaches. Introductory information. This incident, transmitted by Jesus Christ to Jakob Lorber, is not mentioned in the Bible. In a place called Kiss, the Lord heals many sick people, all at the same time. The Pharisees who accompanied the sick see in Jesus, at least for the time being, an Essene, but not the Lord. Chapter 219. The positive spiritual purpose of adversity and suffering. Ahab, a faithful Pharisee, said the following after supper. It goes without saying that I am aware of your nature since Jesaira. And, in my opinion, there is no need for such immense signs for either myself or the likes of me to convince us all abundantly that you are Jehovah Himself, acting through a physical body, borrowed as it were from this earth. But I am curious about whether the 5 Pharisees, seemingly upright people, in all earnest do or do not sense who the one who healed their sick in a truly miraculous way might be. If they had but the faintest idea, they would have to comprehend that no ordinary human could ever possibly accomplish this. In my opinion, one should go and sniff them out a little. Then it should quickly become clear what they actually think of you. Say I, Jesus. Friend, surely you do not doubt that I would know what they think of me. So I don't consider it necessary to interrupt them in their deliberations. On top of that, tomorrow is another day as well, on which many an initiative can be taken in that respect. Let us leave them to some proper fermentation overnight, for just like cider needs fermenting to become a spiritual wine, so does every man's disposition need fermenting, if he is to transcend to the truly spiritual. For you see, if a man possesses everything he needs, he feels quite snug. He cares about nothing. He does not work. He takes it easy and inquires little about the existence of God or life after death, or whether man is more than an animal or vice versa. Mountains and valleys are all the same to him. Winter and summer don't concern him, for in summer he has shade and cooling baths, and in winter he has nicely heated fireplaces and warm clothing. As such, he does not care whether the year was plentiful or not, because firstly, he is provided with all kinds of supplies for 10 years, and secondly, he has plenty of money to buy anything he requires. You see, such a man then lives just as leisurely as a fattened ox in the stable, and does not think much more than an ox as well, and therefore he is no more than a hedonistic animal in human form. If you were to come across such a man, to preach the gospel of the kingdom of God to him, he would do to you what the ox in the stable does to the blowfly, disturbing him in his indulgence. The ox swings its tail over the intruder, and the latter has to take to his heels quickly in order to not be killed, or at least severely injured. Behold, such a carefree glutton will instruct his servants, who are really no more than the hedonist's fly-repelling tail, to chase you away. You will obviously quickly take to your heels, and only from a safe distance can you contemplate the effect your preaching had on the glutton. But I know how to give such oxen quite a different introductory sermon. I let one earthly accident after another befall them. This fills them with all sorts of troubles and fears, causing them to think, to seek, and to find out how it is possible for them to now be so hard-pressed from all sides, since they had never been unjust to anyone, having always lived as orderly and respectable citizens. However, all of it happens to facilitate the necessary fermentation. And so, when such people undergo a proper fermentation, they long for friends who could bring them comfort. Go to them and preach the gospel. They will hear you out and not raise their furiously swinging tails against you. And so you see, for this exact reason, it is good for these guests to undergo a real fermentation this night. This will make them more spiritual internally, and tomorrow we will have easy work with them. Do you understand this? Chapter 220. Jesus' call for positive action. Says Ahab, O wisdom, behold what exalted and true things you contain, and how immensely stupid the likes of us are in comparison. It is an eternal truth that nothing can arise without a struggle, and yet I was about to hurry on over to the people of Bethlehem to start enlightening them. Oh, center of stupidity that I am! Do not the wise men of Greece say, every activity is generated from struggle, and every effect is its outcome? Yet I did not see this. Why do I see it now? Indeed, if there is no preceding contention between the inner life elements of man, then all external efforts with him are futile. I am now fully aware of the instructive conditions of man's life, and I would almost like to establish a fundamental principle of life here, and I believe that I would not be too far off the mark. Say I, Jesus. Let's hear it. I will not look at it within me until you have told us about it. Says Ahab, whatever man has not initially acquired by himself from the properties given to him at the outset, no God can give him without ruining him. To God are, of course, all things possible, but man does not gain anything thereby. When someone does not understand himself first, how can he understand another, and finally, even God? This would be my principle. Am I far off the mark, Lord? Say I, Jesus. No, dear Ahab, you have truthfully hit the nail square on the head. Thus it is. Whatever man does not acquire for himself independently with the abilities bestowed upon him, God cannot and may not provide, without judging him, that is. Therefore, may none of you be just idle hearers of my word, but diligent doers. Only then will you begin to notice its blessings within you. Life is action and not stagnation of the powers upon which life depends. And so, life must be preserved for eternity through the constant activity of all its powers. For in the lying down to rest, no permanent life can prevail. That feeling of well-being you gain from rest is nothing but a partial death of the powers needed for living. Whoever then takes more and more pleasure in the inactive rest, especially of the spiritual life forces, thereby pushes himself more and more into the arms of actual death, from which no God will easily free him. Oh yes, there does exist a proper rest that is full of life as well, but that lies within God, and it is an inexpressibly blissful feeling of satisfaction for every human being, to be active according to God's will. The most blissful feeling of contentment and the clearest realization to have always truly acted according to the order of God is that proper rest within God, which alone is full of life, because it is full of energy and respective action. Every other kind of rest that consists of the ceasing of the life powers is, as already mentioned, an actual death, to the point where the various life forces have withdrawn from activity and will no longer resume it. Do you understand this? Says Judas Iscariot, "Lord, if that is the case, then man should flee from sleep as if it were a pestilence, because sleep is a rest of a number of life forces as well, if only of external ones." Say I, Jesus, "Certainly, that is why late risers will never reach a particularly great age. Whoever grants his body 5 hours of sleep in his young days, and 6 hours in his old age, will usually reach a great age and look youthful for a long time. Whereas a late riser ages quickly, gets a wrinkled face and gray hair, and at a somewhat advanced age, walks around like a shadow. And just as the body gradually dies through too much sleep, on a much larger scale does the soul as well, if it increasingly slackens in its activity, according to my word and will. Once idleness has made itself at home within a soul, soon depravity will follow. For idleness is nothing but a self-indulging love which flees any activity for someone else's sake, because it basically wants one thing only, namely that all others should work for its benefit. Therefore, beware idleness in particular, for it truly is a seed for all kinds of vices. The various predators may serve you as an example. Look, these animals become destructively active only when driven by burning hunger. Once they have captured their prey and satisfied their hunger, they return to their lairs once more, where they will rest, often for days. Especially snakes do this. Now take a look at a robber or murderer. This man who shuns all work, who is an actual devil in the flesh, lies in one of his dens, often for days. Only when his spies tell him that a rich caravan is due to pass his den, he lies in wait, together with his accomplices, ruthlessly attacks and robs the caravan, and kills the merchants to prevent them from betraying him. This is a fruit of idleness. That is why I say once more, beware idleness above all, for it is the pathway and the wide door to all imaginable vices. After a fair day's work, moderate rest is good for the limbs of the body, but excessive rest is worse than none. Chapter 221. The Blessing of Activity. The Lord. If someone has walked a long way and finally reaches a shelter, it is best when he does not go to bed immediately, but continues with small movements, and then gets back on his feet before sunrise on the following day. Doing this, he will not feel any tiredness all day, and the longer he continues his journey this way, the less tired it will make him. If, however, after a day's march, someone arrives incredibly tired at a shelter, and immediately throws himself on a bed, and only leaves it around noon on the following day, he will be continuing his journey on completely stiff feet, and with an utterly drunken head. After covering a certain distance, he will long for a rest from utter exhaustion, and it may even happen that he collapses on the road and perishes, if no one comes to his aid, the possibility for which is quite high. And what has caused this? His great desire for rest and the delusion that rest strengthens a person. If someone wished to achieve an amazing accomplishment in one or the other art form, where a high degree of proficiency of hands and fingers is required, Then I ask you, will he achieve it when, instead of constant and diligent practice, he idly strolls around day after day with his hands in his pockets and only motivated by a kind of anxious concern not to tire his hands and fingers, to prevent them from getting stiff and unfit for the accomplishment he strives for? Truly, even I myself, with all my boundless wisdom, could not create a prophet and determine the time when such disciple of art would become a virtuoso. With this in mind, my dear friends and brothers, I repeat. Only activity upon activity for the common good of humanity will bring you salvation. For all life is the fruit of God's constant, never-tiring activity, and can therefore only be maintained and preserved for eternity through proper activity, whereas nothing but death can and must result from inactivity. Place your hands on your heart and feel how it is constantly active, day and night. The life of the body depends solely on such activity. After all, once the heart stops, it would spell the end of the natural life of the body. And just as the rest of the physical heart clearly constitutes the utter death of the body, so is the rest of the soul's heart the death of the soul itself. The heart of the soul, however, is called love, and its pulse expresses itself in true and complete love activity. Thus, the constant love activity is the never-wearying pulse beat of the soul's heart. The more actively the heart of the soul pulsates, the more life is generated in the soul. And once a sufficiently high degree of life has been achieved, the life of the divine spirit is awakened within the soul. This spirit, being purest life, because it is the untiring and supreme activity itself, then flows into the soul that has become equal to it through love activity. With this, the everlasting and imperishable life has begun within the soul. And behold, all this arises from activity, but never from idle rest. Therefore, shun rest and seek activity, and eternal life will be your reward. Do not believe that I have come to bring peace and rest to mankind on this earth. Oh no, I have only come to bring the sword and war. Men must be impelled to all kinds of activity through distress and hardships. Otherwise, they would become lazy oxen that fatten themselves for eternal death. Distress and hardship bring about fermentation upon fermentation in man, from which, in the end, something spiritual could develop. Of course, one could also say, through distress and hardship, anger, vengeance, murder, manslaughter, envy, hard-heartedness, and persecution arise as well. That is indeed true, but as bad as all that may be, those things are nevertheless better than what results from idle rest, which is dead and brings neither good nor bad. That is why I tell you, let someone be completely warm or completely cold where I am concerned, because I will spit the lukewarm ones out of my mouth. I prefer an energetic enemy to a lukewarm friend, for the energetic enemy will challenge me to total activity, so that I may either win him over or make preparations to render him harmless forevermore. In the presence of a lukewarm friend, however, I become lukewarm myself. And if I should get into trouble, will the lukewarm friend be of any use to me? As such, a lukewarm ruler is a pest for his people as well. For then the nation's spirit decays, and the people all turn into voracious oxen and beasts of burden. But a strict and even tyrannical ruler causes the people to become alive, and there is activity everywhere, so as not to incur punishment. And if a tyrant goes too far, the people will rise in great numbers and rid themselves of their tormentor. I think I have now said enough about the value of activity, and I am convinced that all of you have understood this lesson. Therefore, if someone feels the need for rest for his body, let him seek a bed. But whoever wants to stay up with me through the night, let him remain here. All of them said, Lord, how could we sleep when you are staying up? Only Mother Mary seems to need a rest for her body, so you could send her to bed. But Mary, although she had dozed a little in the recliner behind me, heard these words, sat up, and said to the one who spoke about her in all kindness, Friend, you who usually speaks for your fellow disciples, I tell you that your concern for me is rather vain. For you see, I have stayed up through hundreds of sleepless nights, all for the sake of my Lord, and I am still alive. And if it is His will, I will go through as many sleepless nights again, and I will still not lose my life. So, all of you, do not concern yourselves with me. It is enough that one looks after me. These words were addressed to Thomas, and he walked over to Mary and asked her not to regard his good intention as unkindly. Mary comforted him and was very kind about his concern for her, and Thomas felt at ease in his mind, and soon, quite relieved, resumed his seat. For a while there was now silence. No one spoke, for they all pondered on what had been said, and found the truth of it shining ever brighter. Only Matthew said to himself after a while, Tomorrow at daybreak, this teaching about activity and rest will be recorded as best as possible on a special tablet, because this extremely important lesson must, on no account, be lost to the world. And as it began to dawn soon after, Matthew kept his word, and this lesson was preserved for a long time. Through Joniel and Jirith, it even reached Samaria, but over time it was considerably distorted, and was therefore lost. But while it was still around, it was known to the people as the Night Sermon.